want to be free? Every man and woman? Do we all want freedom? Go back to the first century when these words were spoken. There were probably more slaves in the Roman Empire than there were free people. Estimates vary on that, but there were probably more slaves than free. And only a small fraction of the free people had any real rights. Only Roman citizens had any rights that you could actually count on. Talking about freedom to such an audience would certainly be receptive, but it was also a subversive topic. Now you ask yourself today, though, that must not apply to us, right? Because every American is already free. So do we have any need of this freedom that Jesus is offering? Can we say to Jesus, hey, thanks, man, go talk to people in Africa. They might not be free. Or in Asia, because here we're already free. Did you notice the slogan? Land of the free, home of the brave? We're good. Move on. We're okay. Is there anything beyond this political and economic freedom? Or is that all Jesus came to share? Is the land of the free really free? If somebody told you that you were a slave, wouldn't you deny it? Wouldn't you get out upset and say, whoa, back that up, not me? Let's look at verse 33. They answered him, we're Abraham's descendants. We have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? As you know, we are Abraham's descendants, they say to him. Excuse me, I hit it twice. I'm not there yet. Nope. Didn't hit it enough. Membership has its privileges. That's the one credit card tried to tell you. And that's what it's like when you're a descendant of Abraham. The Jewish audience knew that they didn't have political freedom under Rome. But that's a far cry from being willing to admit that you're a slave. They had pride, and rightfully so, in their heritage, and being able to say, I am a child of Abraham. Would not an American understand that? I'm an American citizen. You're crazy if you're going to tell me I'm not free. Watched Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark with my wife a couple days ago. And good old Marion, Indiana's love connection in that story, while she is being kidnapped, shouts out, you can't do this to me, I'm an American. Just showing how incredulous she was that any American could be anything but free. Along those same lines, the special relationship between Jehovah and Abraham's descendants, in their minds, acted as a guarantee that they could in no way be a slave. I think those of us in the church understand this all too well. Many of us think, my family's been Christians for generations. My grandma, my great-grandma, we were all Christians. We all been members of this church. Of course I'm free. Or they might say to themselves, I've been to church at least a couple times this month. Of course I'm free. Maybe I've been there every time. How could I not be free? It certainly is a wonderful blessing if your parents and your grandparents, etc., have been followers of God. But that does not change the fact of what Jesus is about to say to you. Verse 34. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Truth with a capital T, our world is full of slaves. If you go throughout history, we have probably never had less actual political slaves than we do now in this day and age. But our world is as full as ever of slaves to sin. Political freedom is certainly precious, and I value it as much as you do. But no constitution can declare a man free from the bonds of sin. If the Second Amendment of our Constitution said all men are free of sin, guess what? No big deal, right? We're all free now. Wouldn't have worked. Because no army can defeat sin on the battlefield. No politician can declare men free of sin. The bondage of sin is more powerful than any drug addiction. Think about that. The addict to sin cannot in any way free him or herself. There is nothing that the addict can do to be free from sin. The grip is so strong that each and every man, woman, and child on this earth will return again and again to sin. No vow, no promise, no willpower will prevail against it. The addiction is always fatal. It always leads to death. I'm scared senseless that a good number of my students are taking meth. And we had a discussion with a student in private this week and revealed that at least 6 or 7 of our students are taking meth on a regular basis. That stuff's scary. That stuff will kill you. But it is nothing compared to the power of sin to enslave you and bring about your death. Jesus went on from there. And he said, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Wait a minute, everyone? Yeah, everyone. And when he says everyone, he means everyone. Because sin is more contagious than any disease. All of mankind has contracted it. None of us are immune. If you look back at the Black Death that ravaged Europe, even in the worst hit cities, the death rate never got above 60 or 70%. Even the most virulent and deadly disease will not kill everyone. There will always be some that are immune to catching it and some that survive it. Not so with sin. It is 100% contagious and 100% fatal. Romans 5:12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way, death came to all men, because all sinned. Thankfully, Jesus doesn't end here. He goes on to give us hope and give us purpose. Verse 35. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. Let's contrast the slave with the son for a moment. Why would anyone prefer to be a slave instead of being a member of the family? In this case, God is offering each and every one of us the free opportunity to set aside the chains of bondage to sin and instead, join his family. Join his family in celebration of the victory of his son over death and over sin. Anybody want to take him up on that offer? Anybody think, hey, now that's a deal I can't refuse? Used to be an old game show called Let's Make a Deal. And they tried to convince you that you should trade in your prize for a potentially better one. And it was always murky because they were trying to trick you. When people at home were saying, don't do it, don't be stupid, and people still did. This is not a deal like that. This is a deal with no downside, with no hidden fine print. Unlike anything else you're going to see in this life. And it is not a tentative or a temporary change that he is offering you. He is offering you a chance to be a member of the family. Think about that for a moment. Your family, whoever they are, for better or for worse. Some of us it's a good thing, some of us not so much. They will always be your family. The same rule, the same stipulation applies to the family of God. Once you have shown that your faith is genuine, there can be no doubt that you have been adopted into God's family. And who better to reserve your place at God's table than the Son who he himself said, I am well pleased with. Let's look at verse 36. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Freedom is just a word if it isn't real. Think about communist China. What do they call themselves? The People's Republic of China. What did East Germany used to call itself back in the day? The Democratic Republic of Germany. Anybody fooled into thinking that either of those countries was ever governed of the people and by the people and for the people? Just putting it on the title doesn't mean the people are free. Likewise, freedom is only as good as it is true. So if the Son of God has released you from bondage, What more proof are you waiting for that you really are free? Back to Lincoln. We started looking at Lincoln. He's the one I'm going to talk about. Lincoln is forever known as what? What is his nickname? The Great Emancipator. You know what he did with his Emancipation Proclamation? He freed only those slaves in territory controlled by the Union Army. The vast majority, most people don't know this, of Southern slaves when that proclamation was declared were still legally slaves. And they were slaves until the day a Union soldier walked into their view. And that is the best that he could do. He was a righteous and good man trying to do the best that he could do, and that was it. Compare his best effort to what the Son of God accomplished on the cross and in the empty tomb. Jesus Christ freed each and every man and woman throughout the world and for all time. And he did it once and for all. It cannot be undone. It cannot be revoked. Everyone who is already in Christ is free. Think about that. Let me ask you then, why would any of us still want to be slaves to sin? Why would we choose to sit in the prison cell of our sinful choices and addictions to sin any longer? Why would we choose to walk away from the freedom that Jesus died to make possible? Why wouldn't we breathe the air of a free man? Why wouldn't we walk with the joy and the pride of a free citizen of heaven? 3 thoughts of application before we end here. Number 1, the process of becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ requires both belief and commitment. You have to truly follow Jesus. In case you're forgetting, he told you you had to take up your cross and follow him. Secondly, the truth. It's more than just knowledge. Sometimes we get hung up on just trying to get people to believe. But the truth is supposed to be life-changing. And lastly, something you perhaps have not thought about before. Millions of your fellow Americans live free, but are slaves to sin. And millions of people around the world have never tasted any freedom to compare, but have themselves been released from the chains of sin by the power of Jesus.